Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Land Before Time from 1988. The thing about a lot of dinosaur movies is a major part of it is usually like, look at the wonder of this dinosaur. Look at how amazing this dinosaur is. And one of the few and probably one of the only films about dinosaurs that doesn't do that is this movie. It also is probably why this film has lived on despite not having a home video release in over 12 years and not being as widely available as it probably should. It's never been released on Blu-ray. It's because it's really just about these kids on the road. And you had films like that in the 80s like Goonies or Wizard, and those are films that have lived on in public consciousness, particularly if you were the generation of kids who were the demographic at the right time for those movies. But unlike Goonies and Wizard, The Land Before Time isn't really time specific. Well, I mean, I guess it is because they're dinosaurs, but it's not a time capsule of a certain period. And that's, I think, what's so amazing about it is when you're a kid, and every kid is into dinosaurs. When I was a kid, I remember we went on a trip to Germany and my mom said pack the essentials, and one suitcase had clothes in it and the other suitcase had plastic dinosaurs in it. I was 3, so to have a movie that's just you relating to dinosaurs was an entirely different experience than you're used to. And I think that's what makes this movie so unique and so memorable, because there's not really another movie like The Land Before Time. You're both like, oh cool, dinosaurs, but it's kind of like little kid kind of drama in a lot of it. The way the kids fight in this, almost all the voice actors are actual kids except for Petrie, and it really has a real feeling that you're watching kids, not dinosaurs. Now, I don't think you really think about that, which is kind of one of the smarter things about the movie, is that you're thinking you're watching a bunch of kid dinosaurs, but you're really just watching a bunch of kids, and it makes you feel like you're just watching a kids on the road movie, even though you are watching dinosaurs. That's what made this film unique, is it felt very kind of simple and streamlined and small, but it's a movie about these epic kind of creatures and these smaller little baby creatures, and that's what kind of made it so impactful for especially my age group. Even critics at the time quite liked it because it reminded them of more classic animated films. There's no musical numbers in this movie. There's a song at the end by Diana Ross, which I didn't even know. To me as a kid, it was just some boring lady's song that it was time to get up and go to the bathroom. It's kind of unique at the time, and especially like there's no celebrity voices. It's just solely about these kids going on the journey to the Great Valley, and how it felt like you went through an epic adventure, because it was like an epic adventure you could relate to, because it felt like the neighbor kids down the street or your siblings. How smartly made it was to really appeal to kids. It wasn't talking down to kids, it was relating to kids, and I think that's the thing that made Land Before Time such a classic dinosaur movie. Littlefoot and Sarah. Littlefoot is a long neck and Sarah is a 3-horn, and they are butting heads all the time trying to be friends. And then one day as they are playing, a Tyrannosaurus Rex chases them, and Littlefoot's mother fights off the Tyrannosaurus Rex until, in probably one of the greatest sequences in the movie, where there's the great earth shake as they call it, and the earth splits into 2, and Sarah is separated from her parents, Littlefoot is separated from his grandparents, and his mother is killed by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And him, Sarah, and then 3 other dinosaurs they meet up with: Petrie, who is a pterodactyl or a flyer, Ducky, who is a big mouth, and Spike, who is a spike tail, have all decided to go off and walk to the Great Valley so they can find food again. After Littlefoot has been told by his mother how to get there, and he remembers when she told him before she died, and so they go off on a journey to hopefully get to the Great Valley and not be attacked again by the Sharptooth or the Tyrannosaurus Rex. The Land Before Time is probably one of the very few times that Disney has truly been one-upped by another studio. This came out the same day as Oliver and Company, a much more expensively made film with Billy Joel and Bette Midler on the soundtrack, which now you can kind of laugh at, but in 1988 that was a big movie. And it had songs on the radio, they actually played music videos on kids' TV at the time. They hyped the shit out of Oliver and Company. But here's the thing about kids. Kids will never care who is voicing characters in an animated movie when your choice is, I can watch a bunch of dogs, but I really like is dinosaurs. And so The Land Before Time completely beat Oliver and Company. Critically, it definitely beat Oliver and Company. The reviews to Oliver and Company were nowhere near as strong as The Land Before Time. And The Land Before Time was being compared to classic Disney films like Bambi, like Dumbo. And Oliver and Company, people were looking at that and go, this is where the studio is? There's other times where Disney and Don Bluth have released movies on the same day and around the same time. I can't believe they would release two animated movies on the same day. I think that's kind of stupid. There's other times it did not work out for Don Bluth, but this is the time it really worked out for Don Bluth, and he really just one-upped them. I mean, I remember I have seen Oliver and Company when I was a kid. I remember wanting to see it, but it did not mean as much to me as this movie did. After this, they would make The Little Mermaid and have the Disney Renaissance, and things wouldn't go as well for Don Bluth, but at this time, they really beat Disney. But also, the thing is, like, I actually didn't know that. I was a kid when this came out. I saw it many times, you know, when you'd go over to play at a friend's house and the mom would rent a video, or the videos they had at their home that you watched a million times. And I knew a lot of people who did own Oliver and Company, but to me as a kid, I didn't know they were released at the same time. But I would have always thought this was the better movie. That is really shows you the power of Don Bluth. To be honest, this is my favorite Don Bluth movie. I watched this incessantly as a kid. I loved watching it. There's so many times I remember eating grilled cheese and some chips or, you know, some water or juice and watching this movie and loving it, watching it in school. I watched this so many different times when I was a kid. It became such a part of, I think, growing up at that time. Even the Pizza Hut ad on the VHS of this movie, people can recite. And not because we all like pizza and Pizza Hut and stuff, because we watched this so much, because we're like, that's the extra treat before you see The Land Before Time. Unfortunately, they didn't put the Brad Bird short American Dog that played before this movie did in theaters on the VHS, which I think is a huge mistake. And this was produced by two powerhouses, and very publicly by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were executive producers. The original idea was to do something just like the sequence in Fantasia where the dinosaurs don't talk, and I've noticed in reviews at the time, this is a great movie, but wouldn't have been interesting if they, and Ebert says this actually on Siskel and Ebert, that he wishes they had done a movie where the dinosaurs aren't talking, they act like actual reptiles. But Spielberg and Lucas, being Spielberg and Lucas, knew that that was not going to play as well with kids. That might be an interesting art movie, but if you really want to spend a lot of money on an animated film and have it be successful, you actually have to have voices. And I think that's kind of part of the charm of this movie, how it works. That does sound cool, by the way. I think I would see a whole movie of that, and probably would have been down as a kid for that, because I love that sequence in Fantasia. It is interesting how much this reminds people of classic Disney, and it's certainly like how dark this movie is. Not like lighting wise. I mean, the subject matter is very dark. Littlefoot's mother dies, families are separated. Some of the sequences are just really thrilling and scary. Like, there's a sequence where Sarah and Littlefoot are trying to climb up this wall, and at the end of it is Sharptooth snapping his jaws, like about to eat them. Like, that is a crazy sequence. That is insane. And there's a lot of sequences like that. Disney films, there's a certain donkey scene in Pinocchio that still freaks me the fuck out, and I have a hard time watching it. But it shows, like, kids films should be scary. I don't really agree with, like, hiding kids from emotions, because you don't want to have to explain to your kids what sadness is, because the rest of their life they won't have to experience that, so let's not teach them a natural emotion. But I don't have kids, so what do I know? I just think it's a little odd when you just show these really desensitized movies, because the movies that stay with you, the stories that matter to you, have exciting and different and scary elements to them. Lucas and Spielberg actually decided to cut out about 10 minutes of this movie. It's very short, supposedly one of the shortest feature films ever, although every time I read that I'm like, have you guys not heard of like the early 30s where things were barely an hour? I very much doubt that is, but it's probably one of the last very short features ever made. Lucas and Spielberg really believed in Don Bluth. I think this is Don Bluth really at the height of his powers, and it shows what he could really do with character. I love that they have, except for Petrie, all of the voice actors were kids at the time, and you can sense that. To me, that's how I could really relate to it. Now Petrie, that voice annoys me, because when I'm watching him, like, why is that not a kid? Like, it's so obviously not a kid, and he's kind of the comedic sidekick. I remember really liking Petrie. Now he kind of annoys. He's probably the only part of the movie I seriously dislike, but I like having these kids just be kids. I could always kind of relate to it. I also could relate to it because the Triceratops' name is Sarah, and my sister was named Sarah, and she she was kind of a triceratops, you know. I kind of think I'm a Littlefoot. I'm probably a Spike, to be honest. That really, to me, is like kind of unique about it, because a lot of times in animated films, they don't have kids do the voice of kids. They have voice actors do the voice of kids. And this feels very genuine. And a lot of other animated films and shorts and such have tried to do that, and it's never really felt as real as this. You know, they're definitely kid actors. It's not like they picked a bunch of kids off the street. They got really good kid voice actors. There's some nuances to that you just can't fake. And there's some scenes that, because of that, feel even more tragic, particularly the scene of Littlefoot's mom dying and he's sitting there with her and the camera just pans out. It's really hard not to cry at that sequence. That's a really beautiful sequence, a really sad sequence. The scene I always think of when I think of this movie is the scene where Littlefoot and Sarah have that fight. Sarah's like pushing him against the rocks and Littlefoot's fighting her, and it's just like a little kid fight, like they've had enough of each other. And like that scene feels so real to me. That's one of the scenes that it doesn't feel like a dinosaur movie anymore. And apparently they actually, when they cut those sequences, they brought in psychologists to make sure this film wasn't too dark and too real, and that's why they cut the 10 minutes out. Sometimes they cut to a scene and the editing does feel a little more awkward than you're used to for a film, especially a film that's just so amazingly well crafted as it is. But it kind of works because the characters are so strong, you don't notice it as much. Like most people, I wish they'd release like a director's cut of it and really give this a good Blu-ray release. I've noticed I can't find a non-4:3 version. I'm not exactly sure if this film is just in 4:3, which I think is kind of cool, because that means I've always been able to see the whole frame of this movie. That means like the VHS I had is like the full frame. I've never missed parts of it. I hope they don't do like a shitty like squash it and make it HD. I hope they keep it 4:3. If someone has those 10 minutes of footage, I think it would be great to see. I'd probably still watch this theatrical version because it's the version I know and I love. Maybe it worked for that film's benefit. Maybe it would have been a lot more like those stupid Land Before Time sequel movies I've never seen. Don Bluth, he really wanted to make different films from what Disney was doing. He wanted to make more challenging films. It's always interesting when you make a darker kids film, because it feels so much freeing and more creative, because no one's willing to do it. No one's willing to go there with a kids film. But I always find that much more interesting because it's a dinosaur movie. I mean, look at the poster, like they're smiling and walking on a bridge. Oh yeah, we're happy kid dinosaurs going to the Great Valley. But it still has that in there, and I think that shows how creative and how smart Don Bluth is. You can really tell the detail to it. You can tell the love of both animation, but really the love of storytelling, and how it reminds me of things like Wild Boys on the Road and Goonies and The Wizard. The special thing about this movie, and why this I think is such a unique dinosaur film and then a unique animated film, is because it's just about these kids on the road, and that's essentially all you need to tell with this kind of a story. And it has thrilling, amazing sequences. The sequence where they really go from the Tyrannosaurus Rex attacking the kids to the earthquake is insane. It's an insanely well done sequence. All the action sequences are thrilling and amazing, and there's a good geography to all of them, and there's a surrealness to them. There's the seriousness that they need for the scenes to be impactful for the rest of the movie. He really understood that. Kids movies like to talk down to them, and I think that's what made Land Before Time and Don Bluth such a smart animation director. It also shows kids as being in their realness, you know, not just being innocent and wonderful, but being bad and stupid and too proud and making poor decisions and making bad leaderships. And that you can relate to when you're with a group of kids, because that's what you know from preschool. You might not be able to actually intellectualize it, but I think that's why this film meant so much to so many kids at the time. There's not a lot of films that can really capture that energy as well. It's also an astonishingly well animated film. The backgrounds are gorgeous. Don Bluth did one of his best jobs ever on this film. It was cool to have someone make what was considered like an out of the norm studio animated film when not a lot of studios were doing it. There wasn't a DreamWorks and a Blue Sky and everything. Not many studios had homes like this. And for Don Bluth not only to do that, but to make a film that just really was kind of simple in what it's trying to do. He wasn't trying to do songs, he wasn't trying to make stupid fart jokes or anything. It's just a bunch of kids on a journey. It's a very cool like dinosaur road movie, but it works in the just most universal kid language way. And you can make as many stupid sequels as you want, but I think Land Before Time is certainly one of those one-of-a-kind animated movies. So if you have seen The Land Before Time and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. This is my kind of animated movie I'm reviewing this month. I thought it'd be cool because of Jurassic World. It's not really part of that series. It's just a movie I always loved and wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.